Greetings, brave adventurers! My name is FoxyBard, and welcome to Community Day! I have a story for you today taken from the FoxyBard Discord server. Each Community Day, I take a number of stories from that server and I tell them all to you here. If you would like to tell your own stories, don't forget, you can always join the FoxyBard Discord server. The link for that is down in the description. But without me advertising my own stuff too much, grab yourself a seat around the fire as we dig into this story of role-playing. Today's story comes to us from the user Noble Vagrant, and it is called The Cheater Who Ended Two Campaigns. And this is maybe a different definition of cheater than you're used to in these kinds of videos. You'll see. Tales start. This story starts off in high school, a time in my life when I didn't have much in the way of friends, and hadn't yet immersed myself in nerd culture. Spoiler, she's definitely immersed in nerd culture now. I had just begun to enter my first solid friend group since becoming a teen, a group of buddies gathered across the internet via Discord that my then-girlfriend had ingrained herself in. Some were her friends from as early as elementary school. Others were recent but nonetheless beloved additions, and she was my pathway into meeting people who I felt I could connect to. You can imagine my joy when being offered a seat at their upcoming Shadowrun campaign. I finally had a steady friend group that I felt I belonged in, and I'd get the chance to flex my roleplay muscles and geek out with my fellow players. As you can tell, these hopes were misplaced, to put it lightly. There were a dozen or so members in this group, but important players are as follows. Adept, my girlfriend at the time, ex and friend of GM and everyone else in the group. GM, the game master of our campaign and our problem player. Technomancer, hot-headed friend of the group, daughter of BBEG, and main character. Oh dear. Rigger, brother of the GM, a 4channer and piece of work, but otherwise guiltless in the story. Fiancee, the girlfriend and fiancé of GM, street samurai, me, new to Shadowrun and TTRPGs in general. Now, to understand why this was a bad idea from the start, we need to talk about GM. GM and fiancé lived in the same hometown as Adept and I, the two of them being how Adept met this group of ours in the first place. He was once the partner of Adept, a particularly abusive one. However, between their relationship occurring when they were both so young, and Adept singing his praises and how much he had made up for his past behavior, I was under the impression that this was a guy who had truly changed. This mindset clearly clouded my later behavior, as when he gained an interest in me and offered a place with him in an open relationship, wasn't interested, only to admit later on that he hadn't mentioned this to his girlfriend. I had all too easily forgiven him after Adept, fiancé, and myself had confronted him. He seemed apologetic at the time, which was enough to satisfy my then naive self, as I was desperate for friends and was willing to forgive as long as the others were. Keep this instance in mind for later. It didn't take me long into our game to realize that it wasn't just his character or devotion that was lacking. The man was the most obnoxious game master that I have ever played with, chalking up red flags that I, at the time, had no knowledge of. Specifically, he loved egging people on to get a reaction out of them, and I was his first target. He had made a black market deal scenario in which I was tested by being forced to drink an unknown substance if we wanted the seller's shipment. Oh, this can only end badly. Ghost peppers. It was a smoothie made with ghost peppers. The atmosphere was a very over-the-top, serious tone up to this point, with players coming to the table with the understanding of making the hardest boiled stereotypes they could make. It was because of this that, at the time, I had felt singled out by his actions, especially when he had my character continually make saves to resist screaming in pain or getting sick from the drink. It felt all the more awkward for me when I tried to end the scene already by driving off, only to find that the dealer had somehow had the time to slash my motorcycle's tires for no apparent reason. I had made it a character trait of my samurai that she was a tempered but hot-headed individual, so it felt more and more like the GM was pushing me for something. Sensing this, I decided to just say, "Fox it," and attacked the man and his place of business. I should have known that he would pull dozens of armed guards from the aether to kidnap my PC, but I kind of tuned out for the rest of that first session. I know it sounds silly, but at the time, having a graduated senior and pillar of the friend group set up our PC's introductions to the story, only to have my PC made the butt of the joke in what was otherwise a brooding and serious storyline felt, well, weird. But this was probably me being oversensitive, I thought. No, don't fall into this trap. Don't fall into this trap. If it feels bad, it's probably bad. It was just a joke, and I believed I simply needed to roll with it and laugh along. A few sessions later, he had determined to railroad us through an encounter with the BBEG, where we were, essentially, imprisoned to work as his lackeys. We were unable to advance the plot until we sat down in seats in his office, and when all but a stubborn rigger caved to the GM's insistence and eventually sat down, high-powered magnets were activated to force him into the seat, where we were all suddenly handcuffed to where we sat. Wait, hang on, is this last Friday's story all over again? Oof. When a player brought up that we had resources and allies on the outside that would make this a pain for him, the GM described how he had completely drained our funds and cut us off from all previous contacts. When that wasn't enough, and the rigger rolled to try and struggle out and attack the BBEG, he played the tried and true "sleep gas knocks you out without a save" trope. At the time, I thought it was just poor handling to get his real story started, but even then, I had bad feelings. Another time, he had Techno injured to the point of their arm requiring a sling, and with this PC fancying herself a gunslinger, they were hampered during an invasion of our main base. When trying to get around the issue by propping their weapon against a lean-to, or pushing through the pain to at least be able to handle their weapon, the GM spent a solid 30 minutes willfully misunderstanding the descriptions of her actions or bending any plausibility to rule that she could be at least somewhat capable in such a crucial fight-or-die situation. Combat rolled to a screeching halt as what essentially became a one-sided shouting match took center stage for the party. Techno became more and more frustrated at being misunderstood and the rejection of any option to improve their skills in the slightest. Eventually, we just heard the GM snickering to himself, louder and louder as the argument progressed. He would relent and insist that he was just joking, but everyone in the group was either annoyed or made incredibly uncomfortable. At the time, I had come from a background of toxic social relationships, so this behavior wasn't too out of the ordinary. It's just picking and teasing, I thought. Just a bad sense of humor. Now, you'll notice that I haven't mentioned FIANCEE much during this story. She had decided to stick out of this campaign, preferring to stay with him in a D&D campaign someone else ran. I was eventually invited to watch their games, and I began to notice odd behavior. FIANCEE had made it well known that she wanted to spend time with GM in this game, even going so far as to plan with him on how their characters could get together in his brother's story. Despite this, he barely interacted with her at all during the game, in or out of character. It was clear that it became a dampener on both her mood and the party's overall, and she would later tell Adept and me in private calls that she felt like he was ignoring her more and more. What made this worse was how much time he had spent with another player in and out of game, even going so far as to have an in-game relationship with them. Technomancer. This wasn't helped by the fact that, as the campaign progressed, more and more of the story seemed to center on Technomancer's character as a sort of main character. Most plot points connected back to her in some way, and it was her that got the most focus from the GM. FIANCEE had made it clear to GM that she was uncomfortable with their flirting, being irritated in scrapping their stories for Techno, and becoming hurt at just how much the lines between in-game and out-of-game flirting was blurred. In private, she made it known that she loved GM, but she was afraid of something going on between the two of them. Judging by the title of this story, I think you can see where this case was going. Things boiled to a head one day when meeting up for Shadowrun. I saw that no one else was in the game server, and I asked Adept if we had rescheduled. Tired, she simply told me to check the main server. It was a flood of arguing, GM and Rigger hurling insults at one another, FIANCEE and Adept enraged, friends both in and outside the game trying to calm the situation down. Through bits of arguing and a trickling down of information from Adept, I began to get the full picture. GM had indeed started a relationship with Techno behind FIANCEE's back. They had a relationship going back months. Everything from casual daily life stuff to more intimate matters over text. The only reason FIANCEE ever found out was because the idiot had left his laptop open to their chat logs in full view of FIANCEE. So at least he's not smart about it? It's not a saving grace. Needless to say, she was crushed. Adept, who had gone through very similar situations with GM in the past, had a lot of nasty memories and old feelings resurface, causing her a lot of distress. I myself felt like an idiot, having given GM far too many chances to change a pattern of behavior that he clearly had no intention of breaking. Suffice to say, we were mad. With most of the small community in a haze of confusion and anger, Adept and I took our leave while the dust was still settling. I wish I could say that FIANCEE joined us and dumped that garbage fire of a human being, but sadly, she was still caught on him. I will never understand straight girls. She had invested too much of herself into this guy to leave, and she truly believed that he could be better or that he was worth forgiving. To this day, I still think about how she's doing, and if she's okay. All I know from what Adept told me on her way out was that, to our surprise, most of the server had either forgiven him or didn't see a problem with his behavior. Suffice to say, I think we dodged a bullet when we left. Yeah, probably. This all ultimately killed both campaigns, as no one felt comfortable playing in our Shadowrun campaign anymore, and with Rigger's game being the origin of all this, he didn't want anything to do with the debacle. As much as I wish things had played out differently with FIANCEE and the group, I can at least speak positively for Adept and myself. Though we're no longer together, we remained good friends, and she's moved on far away from that mess of friends. I myself have found new friends, people who I've met over the years and consider a second family. I've also had plenty of opportunities to wash the bad taste of my first tabletop experience out of my mouth, with many of these new friends being avid fans of games like D&D and Pathfinder. Even though it was a labor to go through, with close friends and a game every other day of the week, wow, that's almost as many as me, I think I came out alright in the end. Tail end. So this guy was a piece of work. I dearly hope that FIANCEE is no longer his fiancée, and I don't mean that because she became his wife. I mean that because she got the heck away from that guy. This is someone who probably should fix himself before he tries to have any kind of interpersonal relationships at all, ever again. The cheating out of the way, he was also just a terrible GM who goes to such lengths to purposely make their players angry and start arguments and then get amused when his obviously crappy behavior turns everyone angry at him. It's... I don't know how they all lasted that long. Y'all, if you have someone who's like this, just leave. You can just leave. I promise you. There are other groups out there, and no D&D, or I guess in this case, Shadowrun, is better than bad Shadowrun. Bado-run. Wait, that's stupid. I love it. Okay, when I'm making jokes that bad, it's definitely time to end the video. Don't forget to like the video if you liked the video, subscribe to the channel if you have not yet done so, ring the bell notification icon if you would like to be notified when I upload new videos, and leave me your comments down in the comments section below. You can also join the FoxyBard Discord server if you would like to share stories of your own, or even just hang out and talk to people. It's a pretty active place, and I'm especially active in there, so if you want to meet Foxy, you know the place to go. In addition, a super huge, extra special chocolatey fudge-coated thank you to my patrons over on patreon.com/FoxyBard. Their names are up on the screen right now. Zero Fang 881, Zorolo, Critical Kunik, Tegan Longtail, Sylvia, and Cintaria. I love all of you so much, and I cannot thank you enough for your support. If you would like to become a patron as well, you can head on over to patreon.com/FoxyBard. The link for that is also down in the description. But that will do it for this week's Community Day. So, let's douse the fire and get back to our own adventures.